I'll tell you. In all my years, I never seen, heard, nor smelled an issue that was so dangerous it couldn't be talked about. Hell yes, I'm for debating anything. Rhode Island says yes.
Well, time to take the body out. It's the pain that shakes, the bow that breaks when you're running on the pulpit. It's your free ride. It's your only chance to make it clear. Just open the lockbox and come alive.
What's up, guys? This week, first of all, it's Friday, May 21st, 2021, and this week on FritzCast, we have something a little special. For the first time on FritzCast, I've had a panel of guests. I had 3 guests today, all from the SoundMind Creative Group. These guys, John, Alan, and Matt, I believe. The reason I say that is because those are all pseudonyms. Those are all they're fake names. These guys are actually documentarians. They're working on this documentary that they're calling "Follow the Science on Lockdowns and Liberty." And because of today's toxic environment and all that, which we get into a discussion about, they explain why they're choosing to credit themselves more as the group and have these pseudonym names and all that. And so we talk a little bit about that, but we talk about a lot of the work that they're putting into this documentary and what their plans are and the help that they're looking for, both financially, but also from actual people who have been inadvertently affected by the pandemic, losing their businesses, losing their jobs, losing their homes, because these are the aspects that are glossed over when we talk about, the pandemic, yes, there was lockdowns, but the government took care of everybody. They didn't take care of everybody. That's the problem. So these guys joined the program today for the first ever multi-guest episode of FritzCast, and so it's going to look a little weird because they were doing, they were keeping a shroud of anonymity. I'm on video. They pop up with just those little icon. The screen fills up with just a blank icon when they talk. I thought about trying to splice up and figure out maybe there's a workaround that we could do for this to make it fun, but due to time constraints, as it's just me running the podcast, and I'm taking the L on this one. It's not interesting to look at, but the content and the discussion is very, very much an important one. So with that being said, the links and contact information for these guys are going to be in the description below, and I implore you, check it out. Look at the trailer that they've put together, and really, if you've been adversely affected by the pandemic, if you've suffered at the hands of this thing, or if you're just somebody on the liberty spectrum like I am and other people who watch this show are, then and you just want to reach out and contribute to help them put together this I think important piece of work, then do so. Absolutely. And then I'll catch you on the flip side, on the end of the show, just to drop the links and everything, and talk about next week's guest. So get ready, tighten your seatbelts. SoundMind Creative Group, right here, right now on FritzCast. All right, I'm here with my guests from the SoundMind Creative Group. Gentlemen, joining me is John, Alan, and Matt. How are you guys? Welcome to the show.
Doing great. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, doing good. Yeah,
Indeed,
thanks.
So before we dive in, John, Alan, and Matt, those are all lies. Those aren't your actual names. So let's dive into this real quick. Pseudonyms. You guys are running on an anonymous behind the project, basically. Why? Let's start off with that. Why the secrecy here? What's going on?
Well, I can jump in and just give a definition of it. I mean, the SoundMind Creative Group, it's a production collaborative that we've established for creatives who want to retain a level of privacy, including ourselves, because we want to have a platform so we can freely create without the fear of the harmful pushback of the cancel culture that we all have heard so much about these days. And I mean, generally speaking, all of us embrace freedom of expression, science as a process, not a doctrine, human flourishing, but was it by honoring individual rights, and we also are firm believers in the art of storytelling as a central tool in understanding and sharing truth. So that really brought us together, and we felt if we formed this group, it would give us a platform to develop some projects that we feel we want to create, but also invite more creatives and more filmmakers to work with us who would enjoy putting a premium on privacy.
Yeah, I think that's well said. I'll just add a little bit too on that. Basically, we all kind of work in the industry, and me personally, I can speak a little bit. I've always kind of wanted to do different projects like this, and I've always been hesitant, mainly because of other clients and other work I'm doing, and concern about retaining my livelihood, creating any kind of conflict or controversy there with other clients, and then as well as especially the last year with increase in riots and doxing and crazy stuff like that. Of course, as far as the safety of my family and that kind of thing is another aspect. So going into controversial topics such as this, there can be some people that can be pretty heated about it. That's where when this came up, we decided to go about this way, and we thought, well, like Alan mentioned too, that there might be the possibility of bringing others in that feel the same way as us, that want to put creative energies towards something like this, but are hesitant because of the cancel culture, because of the concerns there.
And I think the shocking aspect of all of this is that we need to do this for a matter of public health debate and public policy debate. A year ago, if you had asked me if this would have been necessary, I would have said, you're crazy. There's no way in America this would be necessary. I mean, certainly I've experienced, as somebody with heterodox viewpoints in the entertainment industry, a need to kind of be quiet about those. But I was pretty vocal on Facebook about my opposition to some of these policies early on, and I found that I just got piled on by the opposition, and it became pointless to even post anything that was evidence-based that was contrary to the mainstream narrative. So it's kind of the culture of the entertainment industry plus the hotness of this issue that has prompted us to retain our anonymity.
Yeah, I was going to say for you guys and the industry, you guys really are outliers. It's like, I don't know what it is about the whole, filmmaking business, even documentarians, that if you don't fall in line with this line of thinking, you're the outcast guys, and they will do everything in their power to kind of like not only keep you out of the business, but to ruin you entirely. And I can definitely see this angle of, well, I don't want to get involved in this because I've got a family, I've got a personal life, I've got jobs, I've got things on the table, and I don't want them affected. I don't think it's unreasonable to want that kind of, thing, especially in this world. You guys have already mentioned it. Doxing online, internet mobs, all this crazy stuff that goes on in the world, just for having either a difference of opinion or just even looking a different way at something, and it's like you're in the crosshairs.
Yeah, and well, it's all about putting people back on their heels, I suppose. Because I mean, normally when you develop a film, it's a relatively private. You know, there's intellectual property. You put together a team. You do it behind the scenes. Now with the modern era of modern media, where you are your own brand and you're trying to raise funds around it. It's sort of obviously there's a little bit of a you're like, oh, here's what we're doing and here's who we are and here's how you could very easily just do very simple things to make it kind of put a roadblock in terms of just the idea of if someone starts harassing you, then that's a distraction, and that's an emotional distraction. It's a professional distraction. We don't want to, and we feel that that's a very unfortunate reality that has become the norm with the online mobs, as it were. But also within the Hollywood industry, it's always been, I mean, LA, Southern California, there's a severe problem of groupthink. And then within that, you have the film industry, which has always been very subtle. Like no one ever says no there. The worst you ever hear is, I liked it, I didn't love it. That usually means a hard pass on your project. And then over the years, I always found that most of my stuff was always like, oh, your stuff's too smart. And and I would try to make these kind of very politically neutral or sort of more insightful, politically complex projects, and the no was always, oh, it's too smart, it's way too smart. But I mean, I think that was probably the hard no, and like, yeah, no, this does not comply with groupthink. I think is probably how best to interpret that kind of those types of notes, and that's just and that's been the reality of the Hollywood scene for a long time. And now in this age, things are so much more extreme. We just felt it was we would experiment with this SoundMind Creative Group as a way to express ourselves freely.
Gotcha. So is this SoundMind Creative Group? Is this the inception of it? Is this like the first steps of this group, or have you guys done anything prior under this name, or have you just had prior experience in the industry doing other projects?
Yeah, we've never done anything under this name. This is the beginning of that. We have collaborated together on other projects, and between our core group, we have worked for decades in the entertainment industry. We have in our group director, editor, screenwriter, composer, music supervisor, broadcast journalist. And we're reaching out to some other people and aiming to bring them in as well. We're looking for some line producers, animators, and we have people that we're already in touch with about that. And we really have worked on all kinds of media, from feature films to documentaries to commercials to web series, basically any kind of media. One of us at least has been involved in doing those over the decades of our life in the entertainment industry.
All right. Well, yeah. So this is the first steps then under the SoundMind Creative Group. So it's called Follow the Science on Lockdowns and Liberty. That's the project that you guys are referring to right now.
Yeah, that's our first project. That's the initial project. Follow the Science on Lockdowns and Liberty. It's a 2-phase project. We're making a feature film, in effect, essentially, but we also want to get out a rapid turnaround 20 minute to 30 minute piece where we really focus on the numbers and the data surrounding the lockdowns and get a series of scientific minds into that. I'll just jump in quickly and say, like, we're actually having very good response to it so far. We've already raised about $72,000 on our fundraiser.com page. That's just to do the quick thing. It's fundraiser, which is RAZR, fundraiser.com/follow the science is where we're raising funds for the films. And it's part of the reason why we're here today. We're promoting the film and looking to raise funds for it and reaching out to people who want to see this film made. And it's our first major endeavor. And what we want to do is release the first phase of the film come the fall, and then have the feature done a year from now.
Okay. All right.
And I'd follow up on that by saying, you know, the three of us really see this as a critical project. It's not just a topic that interests us, and a story that we feel like we need to make. It's something that we believe is critical at this point in history, if for nothing else, to get it out there on the record, to say,
Exactly,
you know, here's an alternative viewpoint on what the mainstream narrative has been. I mean, beyond that, beyond just getting it on the record, we hope that it will appeal to a wide enough audience that it might arm people with information where they can push back against these kinds of policies that have been so destructive for so many people across the world. So we see it as something that has to get made and has to get out there.
Yeah, I think in following up on that point, I mean, as far as wide appeal, I mean, that's been, as we've been developing this, it's and consulting with others as we're deciding on sort of direction on this, is we're very carefully trying to craft the tone of the film that especially the feature in particular next year, which would have, you know, as John kind of mentioned, maybe like a retrospective kind of perspective, kind of looking back at what happened, what was done wrong, what could have been done better, and so we could learn from it, you know, not to repeat history in the future and that kind of thing. So to have that kind of quality, but I think, you know, we want to play it in a way that the perspective is, you know, we're going to play it very carefully because we want the widest appeal possible. So we're not going to go down too many rabbit holes or into speculation too far or any kind of conspiracy theory. We're really going to try to stick to the science very specifically. I mean, ultimately, I mean, a good litmus test might be if we could get it distributed on some kind of a mainstream platform next year, the feature, maybe like Netflix or something like that. If we can play the line just so that it has a shot at that, you know, that would be a big win. That would get it the most eyeballs on it possible, you know, and we'll still get pushback, I'm sure, but, you know, at least, you know, and maybe in next year, the timing of next year might, you know, hopefully enough people will have calmed down by then that, you know, there's a chance at that. So.
Yeah, and that's actually another point that I wanted to play off of, Matt, that you brought up, is that as we can see, the CDC came out about, I think it was 2 weeks ago now, or a week ago, about how the mask mandates are going away for those who have been, quote unquote, fully vaccinated. And now it's the question of how are places going to really be asking people for those vaccine cards? Are people really going to be checking those at doors at public events and stuff? Or are people just going to be like, oh, they're not wearing a mask and I'm not paranoid and I'm not going to harp on that person? Now, I know how I think. I know how I've seen in the world that, you know, we've seen a lot of crazy things. I'm willing to bet that there's a lot of people in the public who are still going to be sticklers over masks for a little bit, even though the CDC has come out and put out what they've said, and they've said it contradictory to things that they've said before. Now we get lines about how the science has evolved rather than, you know, the science is settled or something in comparison. So do you guys feel like this work has just increasingly become doubly important now because we're in this position where a lot of people might just get full nosedive into, you know, going back to somewhat normal and forgetting about the last, you know, year and a half that has been chaotic in their lives, and they're just going to be happy that they can go out and do things, and this is another one of those moments in history where people truly forget unless they're reminded, unless they're really pressed to think outside of that group think box?
Yeah, I think that that's certainly a concern, is that as we move toward the summer and mask mandates start to drop away, lockdowns start to drop away, people are going to be very excited to get back to normal, and I think they're going to be encouraged to forget. But the reality is the politicians now have seen how easily people will just give up their rights if enough fear is injected into the narrative and into the media. And part of our motivation to do the short form version and have it released in the fall is that our concern is that there might be a resurgence of cases in the fall and then a return to these kinds of policies. So we see the short form version as a possible antidote to that. And another piece of the entire project is that we want to tell the stories of people whose lives have been adversely affected by these policies, to really get them out there, because those have been massively underreported, and there are really compelling stories that should be weighed in the balance against the impacts of COVID itself, and hopefully getting those stories out there will resuscitate people's concern and interest about the matter that might have gone a bit dormant.
Well, and I'll add too, like in terms of narrative, we also invite people. Another site to push is that we're inviting people to submit their stories, because we want to actually collect those stories as part of our development process. So at our actual URL at our website of soundmindcreativegroup.com, there's a portal there for people to share their story with us, and we're asking for stories to build on that. And we're looking for, we understand that there were so many instances of people not receiving critical medical care for all the other diseases and medical issues in the world. And then so much lost time from children and students and all sorts of folks who had dreams of various sorts, and then all got put on hold. All kinds of suffering because of the psychological ramifications of being isolated for a year. We're going to be unpacking that for years to come. And yet we had this narrative of this mainstream political narrative that just never quite rung. For me, it was very intuitive, where it was just like, it just never quite rang truthful. It just was like, just repeat it, and convince people that they were doing the right thing by giving up their rights. Now, to your earlier point about, will people this summer think, oh wow, I know what freedom feels like now because I'm out? Perhaps that's I would hope for that, but I think that the psychological grooming of getting people used to being told what to do, as combined with a sort of systematic fear-based culture of shunning and shaming, I think is very much ingrained in the popular psyche, and it's going to take a lot to unpack that and push back against it. And that's part of the reason we want to get this narrative in there as part of the historical record, at the very least, to say, look, this isn't the way we need to be as a culture. I think shunning and shaming is not something we want to have as a mainstreamed way of implementing policy, and that's a big part of what our film represents, pushing back against that.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just add a little bit to that. I mean, this psychological grooming, I mean, a lot of it, as was kind of brought up, I mean, feels to me anyways, it's certainly fear as a catalyst into sort of pushing so many people into almost sort of a mass psychosis, delusional thinking. And yeah, I think if we can craft this in a way that we can try to be compassionate to that fact and not ridicule those who we feel might actually be victims of sort of the psychological grooming, and of course, I think an element of the film, we've been talking about a bit as well, that we're going to try to find a way to integrate in there is using humor a little bit, and ridicule, especially of the quote unquote medical experts and such that have kind of misguided and pulled one over on a lot of people, and use humor in a way to kind of break down that fear in people, and hopefully we're still, again, still in development. So these are the kinds of things we're thinking about and ways we're trying to figure out how we can craft this to do that kind of thing. But yeah, that's a little bit more on that aspect.
Okay. No, I love hearing that. I love hearing that's the approach that you guys are going to take, especially tapping into, the real stories from people, from individuals. A lot of people went by the wayside. Businesses got, crushed, and no recovery in sight. And, my biggest thing during the whole thing is how the government's solution to, hey, we're going to keep you at home and you can't go to work or anything, is we're going to cut these checks every quarter or so. We're going to debate how much money we should give you that'll help you get by, despite the fact that we've completely taken livelihoods away from you. Like that aspect of, hey, we're still trying to take care of you, even though we've basically turned virtually every right that you have into a privilege that we can grant and take away and turn on and off with a switch. So in your guys' development of this, obviously you've had to look at it's a worldwide event. Is there any places in particular outside of the United States where you guys have been like, look, this is stuff that that wasn't extreme, that was more open, that was more honest, and that handled it better than we did in the United States?
Well, certainly Sweden is an example of a country. From our experience with the data, looking at the data, it seems that their results were no worse than neighboring countries. I believe there's been some debate about Denmark and maybe Finland, but a point that's been important to make about the data is that even if Sweden was a little bit worse than its neighboring countries, that's not enough. A little bit worse is not enough to justify the draconian policies that have devastating consequences. It would have to be a whole lot worse in order to justify those kinds of policies, at least on a practical level. I mean, I'm not even sure they could be justified then, on an individual rights level. But so that's part of the issue, is looking at the data and seeing, was there a substantial difference? And there wasn't with Sweden. So that's certainly one I think we'll probably bring up, even though our project is going to be largely focused on America and American policies.
Gotcha.
And also, and looking at the narrative, the language used, I mean, where they only reported when a country such as Sweden was more hands off, they were hammered whenever anything went wrong. But if anything went well, there was crickets. There'd be nothing about it. And then anytime, I mean, when the lockdown measures, it was always kind of sold as out of an abundance of caution. And I almost also saw like the weaponization of these terms, like out of an abundance of caution, we're going to remove your ability to work, leave your home, socially congregate, live your life, live in a state of freedom. And part of that is the way that it was almost like the weaponization of empathy, where they would make you emotionally feel bad about it. So we want to look at the language used, the sin of omission, what they covered, how they covered it, when they didn't cover it. We could see the patterns there, and so we think doing a little comparing and contrasting. I mean, was it John, correct me if I'm wrong, was it the Czech Republic? They were the ones they were sort of bragging because they went so draconian, and then they had a spike just like everybody else did in terms of the lockdown measures. So you had they were like, oh yes, we have complete compliance, 100% compliance, and we're safe and sound, and their spike matched everyone else's spike in every way, and it was as if the lockdown measures didn't even exist, and yet you heard nothing about that in the news. And that's the kind of thing we want to shine a light on.
We should mention that we're working with a number of people on this project, both in the research aspect, and that will probably be interview subjects and collaborating with us on this. We've been in touch with Nick Hudson at Panda, who's doing just amazing work at really collating the data, getting it out there, and making the case for why these policies were not justified. And we're also, we've been in touch with the Twitter handle Ian MSC, who's been doing amazing charts, pairwise comparisons of different states and different countries that really has informed our understanding of these issues.
So a lot of the data that you guys have been focusing on is a lot of the data that you guys have been focusing on is also on how these policies put into place haven't had a truly effective impact is what I'm getting, right?
Yeah, I mean, Nick Hudson, that I just mentioned from Panda, makes the claim that there's no impact. That if you zoom out and look across various states and various countries, there's no positive impact. He actually makes the case that there may even be some negative impact from these policies, and we can go into the science of why that might be true. But that there are certain places where the data shows that that lockdowns and mask mandates have actually made things worse, not better.
Yeah, and that might, and unless we have anything, more specific as far as reasons why, we may or may not go into that. I mean, we have our speculations, of course. There's a lot of reasons. I mean, just looking at basic immune system functionality and effect of stress and fear and isolation on an immune system can do. So, but as far as in the documentary, whether we go into any of that, it's just going to depend. If we uncover more science that really backs that up, then that may be in there. But in any case, I mean, obviously, most people that know a little bit about statistics, correlation doesn't necessarily equal causation, but a lack of correlation certainly means there is no causation connection there, and that's what we're seeing. That's what the data is showing, really. And it's not just the lockdowns, although that's probably the more drastic thing. I mean, even with the mask mandates too, which we will get into masks as well in this documentary. Now, and you brought up earlier about the vaccines. We've talked about that a little bit. I mean, I think we want to stay a little more focused on the year 2020 in particular, and lockdowns and masks. Now, perhaps a follow-up documentary could be something on the vaccines, depending on how that evolves over the next year. Hopefully we don't need to make that documentary, but in either case, I mean, I'm sure it'll be brought up in the documentary a little bit anyways, but that's another thing.
That's almost a whole nother ball game. I really hope that you guys wouldn't have to make one on the vaccine. I have this feeling in my gut where I'm like, I don't think this is over yet. Speaking on this, one of the last focuses I wanted to bring up on this is that obviously you guys must be looking at how government and media kind of walked in lockstep on this. I mean, and it's still happening as we speak. I think it was a couple of days ago, the LA Times came out with a big article about, yes, the lockdowns worked, and and it didn't have any negative economic impact. And I'm like, hold on, wait a minute.
Yeah,
hold on.
It's pure hyperbole, right? I mean, there's never question, always champion. I mean, I agree. It's just sort of this nonstop repetitive messaging that doesn't seem to be tethered to reality.
So are you guys looking at that as in, like, obviously this is like propaganda, straight up, tried and true. Don't question the bosses. Don't question the guys in the hot seats, because obviously they would never do anything wrong for us. They would never do anything nefarious either. And anybody who would question it, getting labeled, a conspiracy theorist, trying to throw you in the same category as somebody wearing a tinfoil hat or something. That's obviously a little bit dangerous. So are you guys focusing or having angles on how the media has covered these events and what they've chosen to focus on and what they've chosen to ignore entirely?
Yeah, I mean, I think if in particular, if the data shows something that's contradictory to what they're saying, there will be probably quite a bit of that in the documentary in particular. It's going to be a little tricky because, like you said, I mean, it is, we're kind of, pulling the sheet over as far as that, like, it's just a little tricky, but I think if we can really be sure we're strong on the science and the data on that side of it, that's in both, not just having that indicate the conclusions, but also just in the presentation, how it's presented and how that unfolds in the timeline and of the actual film itself. That's going to be critical. So we're going to be careful about that.
Well, and just returning to like normal journalistic integrity of asking questions of all sides, looking for proof and evidence of the claims, and it just seems as if the political narrative and the media, the mainstream media narratives, just really you never heard the open debate. Anyone asked a simple question, and they'd be the first ones to condemn it as radical and going down the rabbit hole and utilizing all these. There certainly are plenty of cranks in the world, but these are people who are these are people who see like there are gaps in this narrative. There are omissions that are obvious. Some people want to pull together things that they know that may seem a little disparate to pull together, and it starts to sound a little weird, and that's been categorized as sort of the conspiracy theorist sort of phenomena, if you will. However, good rational debate and doubt and the scientific method of asking questions is getting cast into that same pit by anyone who has who wants to maintain the status quo of their control on message. And trying to separate those is an important part of what we're doing, and saying, look, we just want to ask these questions. We want to cast the doubt appropriately. We want to give space to those scientists and those analysts and talking heads and frankly citizens and individuals who had stories that contradicted all of this, and give them their due without them being slandered and libeled for disagreeing with the mainstream views and the politicians in power.
That's an important reason why we've chosen to title it "Follow the Science," because that's a bromide that has been pummeled and used as a form of clamping down on scientific dissent against the mainstream narrative, and to our mind, that's not science at all. That's the political abuse of people's adoration of science. And there's a author named Matthew Crawford, and I think other people have used this term too. That's more scientism than it is the scientific method. It's putting science up on a pedestal and scientific conclusions up on a pedestal and assuming that they're hardened and that they're doctrine. And our perspective very much is that science is a process, especially with something that has so many unknown variables like COVID. There are a lot of questions that need to be asked in order to come to a real understanding of what's going on. And so part of the longer form project will really be looking at what it means to practice science and what it means for politicians to insert themselves into the scientific process, which to my mind is something quite dangerous.
And even these claims of that this is a public health issue, not a civil liberties issue, where it's even the denial of the civil liberties as an issue at all, because this idea of it being a public health issue trumps that somehow so entirely that it's not allowed to be brought up. I mean, that's the kind of thing we're like, well, that doesn't, no, these are all viable things to bring into the idea of what it is to take risks and responsibility and what sort of policies we expect from the leaders of our country.
No, absolutely. Yeah. I'm sorry to cut you off. Go
ahead.
ahead.
No, I was just going to say we should mention that on the fundraiser page, which again is fundraiser.com /follow the science, razor spelled RAZR. There's a 5-minute trailer where you can get a sense of what we're going for with the documentary. It's not necessarily the tone that we'll take with either project, but it was a good way to kind of preemptively put some material together that we think is critical to the story we're attempting to tell.
And there's a full breakdown of our process of our team in general terms, as well as the fact that we want to do this. We have a phase 1 in the short form. We're actually raising the initial $100,000 for that to get the 20-30 minute short out, which will then lead to the feature film, which we're shooting for about the $500,000 range. We have a $300,000 goal initially to get us a firm foundation for the feature film going, and we're actually going for $500,000 for the project, and then beyond for our marketing budget after that. So if all that information's on the websites there, and then also just the soundmindcreativegroup.com is where we're asking for people to submit their stories. We'd love to hear stories of anyone's discrete stories of their experiences of what the lockdowns did to them, and either in terms of their health, in terms of their business, in terms of their lifestyle, in terms of what it is to lose their freedoms and have to fight for them and have that fall on pretty deaf ears across the board, as far as we can tell in terms of the mainstream.
Just to follow up on that too, I think there might be people who here were trying to raise $500,000 to make a documentary and be like, what? That's an insane amount of money. Aren't people making documentaries for $50,000, $100,000 now? Our philosophy on this project from the beginning has been that this is such a critical issue that it needs to be made well. And being made well means bringing the right talent on, having the right research involved, having people whose faces are in the documentary who really represent it well. And all of those things cost money. Having the graphics animated in a way that's very accessible. We don't want to compromise on the quality of this because we want it to stand out there in contrast to many of the very well-made documentaries that get a lot of visible attention. We don't want it to be a flash in the pan that is going to be easily dismissed as right-wing propaganda or whatever it might be labeled as. So that's been our thinking on the budget on this.
Okay. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I was getting ready to wrap up and tell you guys to share the links. I think you already did. I think you already put all the links. So in conclusion with that, though, because we went over a host of different topics. Was there anything in particular that I didn't bring up that you guys want to throw out there before we conclude this, or is this good enough? It's a big project. You expect a lot more to be going on, and inviting people to come and contribute as best they can.
Yeah, I'll just add in too, it was already brought up about people submitting stories as well from the site, and of course, obviously donating to the fundraiser, the crowdfunding. But additionally too, anyone that wants to just contact us, maybe they just want to help in any other kind of way, have different skills, whether it's creative skills, we're going to be looking for crew and such, and or even just from a research perspective or anyone that might have some other insights, they can certainly reach us as well. Our email should be on the soundmindcreativegroup.com website there, and we have a Proton mail. It's soundmindcreativegroup@protonmail.com. So anyone can just reach out if you have any questions or want to contribute in other ways as well. So
I'd also mention that an aspect of what we're attempting to do with this is to kind of crowdsource both the stories, but also couple of the perks for people that donate is to become a part of our communities of kind of advisors on the film. We want to get people's feedback as we go along. So we'll, at a certain level, I believe it's the $500 level, we'll be inviting people into a community to see different aspects of our early cuts of the film, get feedback, provide information, and help us along the process. So we certainly welcome people to join us along this journey. And we see this as a lifeline, and we hope that people will get behind it in that way, that we really want this project to, whatever degree is possible, impact the debate about these issues and stand up for the rights of people and the right for people to live a life according to their values and their assessment of the risks, rather than top-down conclusions about that stuff.
Yeah, and I'll say too, in terms of the reason we're making this film, it's so important to capture. We've all just lived through a piece of history, a major transitional piece of history. And it is so very important to make a proper film that captures the wisdom of it. Now, sometimes it's like, oh, we'll just get the knowledge out there, get the data out there. Or it's like, oh, just have the emotions and that'll capture people. But we really need to link those two. When you marry knowledge and wisdom, or knowledge and emotion, you really do capture wisdom, and the wisdom is what we want to pass along, and the wisdom will be the basis for creating a new narrative, a new way of talking about this, so that we can all sort of unify as to what are the talking points that were used against us. How do we talk about them in a way that we don't fall into the linguistical traps that are all too common today, and have something, a resource that we can all fall back on. Like, look, this is, and all the documentaries that I'm sure will be coming out soon about this topic, like if they all sort of start to unify around a way of conceiving of it and a way of passing on the wisdom and a way of talking about it, I think we have a chance of really shifting the conversation in a way that's beneficial to those who see freedom of expression to be paramount to our existence as free thinking individuals. And so we really, and as such, I mean, we tens of millions of dollars are spent every day in the mainstream media to get us to talk about it a certain way, and we're hoping that our humble film will be part of the effort to push back against that. So we appreciate that your listeners gave us their time and listening today, and we ask for your support, or if anything, your eyeballs to watch it when it's done. So appreciate it.
Awesome. John, Alan, Matt, I thank you guys for coming on, even though that's not your real names. I still appreciate and
Yeah.
for you guys to come down and break that down for us. I'll be keeping my eyes peeled on this. I'll reach out to you guys when it's closer to launch time, maybe have you back on, and we can talk about your full-on experience and get ready for launching it too. But thank you guys for your time, for the SoundMind Creative Group. All the information we went over, all the links, contact, emails, all that, I'm going to put that in the show notes for you guys listening and watching out there for easy access. And guys, really do appreciate it. Thanks for coming on FritzCast.
Thanks, Fritz.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Fritz. Appreciate it.
Take care.
All right, guys, that was SoundMind Creative Group on FritzCast. Great group of guys to come on and talk about this project that they're doing. And even though the links are below, I'm going to throw them out right here, right now, verbally for you. So you can type them up and do what you got to do, but you can just click them below for real. So donating, their crowdfunding site is fundraiser, fundrazr.com/followthescience. Their website is soundmindcreativegroup.com, where you can also tell them your pandemic story if you have someone to tell. They're accepting cryptocurrency donations as well, and they've raised over $72,000 of a $500,000 goal, as you heard them discuss in the interview. You can also reach out to these guys via email, soundmindcreativegroup@protonmail.com. And I implore you to do so. And guys, if you liked the content of this episode, as always, share it. It's the easiest, cheapest thing you can do. Click the share button, put it on your Twitter, your Facebook, tell your friends, your family, share it with your groups and organizations as well. Throw it out there. And try to branch that out and get these guys the attention that I believe that they deserve. Absolutely. As for me, if you want to follow me, Twitter is @FritzQS, Facebook.com/TheFritzCast, FritzCastPodcast@gmail.com. And the website is fritzcast.webnode.com. As always, it's been real. I'm glad that you guys came this week. It was a great episode, great jam-packed interview with 3 great individuals working on this project. And next week, I have returning to the podcast Spike Cohen ahead of Liberty Speaks for Delaware, which is in 2 weeks, beginning of June, and then the Delaware Libertarian Party Convention, which I will be in attendance at, which maybe I'll have some goodies for you for that, just to cover that and share that out, what we're doing here in Delaware. In the meantime, guys, remember, I love you, and I'll see you next week with Spike Cohen.